Welcome back. Okay, well, I'm Alexander Laszlo, and this is now session 3 of day 2 of the symposium, the International Symposium on a New Paradigm in Politics, brought to you by the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. And we've had some amazing explorations yesterday. And today, we've been building more in an experiential frame around what it means to embody and enact this sense of a unitary consciousness. And we just experienced an amazing engagement among 9 people who walked us through the process of moving from separated individual consciousness stances, kind of the ways of thinking and answering questions separatedly, and moving towards a greater sense of interbeing, which brings us to this session. Interbeing is something that one of our panelists, Charles Eisenstein, is very strong on and has written about beautifully. And so now we are going to move into this session today. And indeed, not only does this session flow out of our session 2, but it prepares the stage for tomorrow's engagement, which is going to be truly interactive and participatory all day long. So without further ado, I'm going to invite my co-moderator here and main facilitator for this session, Anneloes Smitsman, back to join me here and to open this session.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And a warm welcome everyone here. If you've just joined, then know that we've already been nicely warmed up with some amazing sessions, many of them which were actually quite experiential. And I think that is the spirit really of also this conference. I know a lot of people want to go into action, but we're also exploring being the systems we want to see in the world and not just going straight into doing, because I think that we've been doing that a lot. Just the doing, but now we're aligning the being and the doing and the action, but really from 3 key new paradigm principles. And these are also researched principles, and we're going to be exploring that in our session today. And that's all about unity and diversity, holarchy instead of hierarchy, and evolutionary coherence. Now, for some, these principles may sound a bit fluffy or complex even. So when we're speaking unity from a new paradigm research and scientific perspective, what we're really seeing is that on an informational level, that the universe itself is a unified, single, coherent entity, and that there is a deeper architecture of wholeness all the way through at all scales and levels of existence. So that unity is not just a philosophical concept. At a deeper informational level, what we are seeing is that reality itself is unified, and that even space, time, and energy matter can be seen as complementary states of information. So that is really a radical new perspective from the previous kind of mechanistic worldview that we're living in a universe of separateness and separate parts and particles. And that has major implications for our governance. It has major implications for our economic systems, because if we're looking at the dominant systems in our world today, politically, educationally, in terms of our governance, then what we're seeing is that we've created an informational architecture of duality, of polarization, where instead of bringing our diversity collaboratively together as nature does, we are dividing it and we're creating win-lose systems. And worst of all, if we're looking at how does the democratic system renew itself, by creating a loser. I mean, if you think about it fundamentally, in order to get a new democratic cycle by election, someone has to lose and someone else has to win. Nature doesn't do that. Nature does not use that principle of self-transformation and renewal. Nothing is lost in living systems. All the information also of what's dying and decaying gets reintegrated. So what we're going to be exploring then for today's session is what is it that we need to understand fundamentally about these new paradigm principles, unity and diversity, holarchy, which is all about holons, holes nested in larger holes. Instead of hierarchy, which disrupts the diversity of a system, and evolutionary coherence, which we could see is almost like the invisible conductor of a system. When evolutionary coherence is present, the diversity in a system becomes naturally collaborative. It naturally supports the resilience of a system. Yet when the evolutionary coherence goes below a certain threshold, that we start to see is cancerous patterns that are forming, polarized diversity rather than collaborative diversity, illnesses, division, breakdown, anthropic forms of organization. So evolutionary coherence is truly a key principle. And right now, in our current dominant economic, governance, and educational systems, unfortunately, by design, we are designing for entropy and not evolutionary coherence. So it's really no surprise that we are in a sustainability crisis right now, which is actually an invitation to fundamentally re-envision and redesign our societal systems. And the good news is that we can, and the new paradigm science and research gives us some leading principles that we can apply in design, in governance. And we'll be exploring that with this panel. Just want to, as a really practical case study, just share with you, and we'll be talking about that more tomorrow. Maybe Alexander, when I share this, you can share the link I sent to you in private message, which is about seeds. So I'm one of the architects of seeds. Seeds is a whole new financial, economic, and governance system with the organization HIFA, which stands for also these are decentralized human organisms rather than just decentralized autonomous self-governance. And what is really it's based on is it's an experiment that has brought people around the world together for the redesign of our financial and economic systems, and to also create by design algorithms for generosity, algorithms for collaboration, algorithms in trust, in gratitude. Seeds has also its own financial currencies, digital currencies that are based on regenerative design principles. And all those principles that I'm sharing with you now, I've applied in part 1 of the Constitution of Seeds, which has been adopted by its citizens by unanimity quorum on the 10th of July, after a process of more than a year of input from about 8,000 different people around the world, with many different rounds of co-creations and assemblies. We've come to this, where we've truly been working on constitutionalizing these 3 fundamental principles: unity and diversity, holarchic design principles, and design for regeneration and thrivability, based on the fundamental principle of how do we work with evolutionary coherent systems. So with that as a kind of introduction, and tomorrow we're going to be exploring that deeper. What does that mean? How can we now start to design these next steps together? Also to take some basic concepts home for all of us in our community to see how we can start to initiate these necessary systems changes, but also cultural shifts and changes. And so tomorrow, a day of a lot of actions and workshops and collaboration. But now I'd like to just bring forward our lovely panel. So if they can be spotlighted and bring them with me into the room. Yes, Charles, welcome, Charles. And Flavia, great. Naresh, very good. Now, Jack Bislal from Mauritius, who was supposed to be here as well, unfortunately is not able to join because of health reasons. He sends his regards, but we'll be having this conversation with him, without him. So I'd like to just presence very quickly first our amazing panel here. Now, starting with Charles Einstein. I mean, you are really a name on its own, because you're a speaker and a writer focusing on themes of civilization, consciousness, money, human culture, evolution. I've seen so many of your incredible short films, and I've really seen they go viral around the world. And I really acknowledge you also for the powerful new narratives that you've been seeding in the world and creating new paradigm waves, and really I think your stories are a living embodiment of these 3 new paradigm principles that we've just presented. So very warm welcome, Charles. Delighted that you're here with us. And then Flavia Valgiusti, I hope I do pronounce your name well.
Valgiusti, va bene.
Oh, good. Thank you for correcting me. Well, it's such an honor that you're here. Really looking forward to learning from you as well. You've worked as a former judge, an author, a speaker, and facilitator of collective trauma healing in Argentina and Latin America, which is major work. And I really acknowledge you also for how you've been working on focusing on trauma-informed law and advocating for the integration of law and spirituality. Now that is really pioneering work. Coming from a law background myself, I know that must not be easy. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Anneloes.
And Naresh Singh, so honored that you are with us here. You are a professor and vice dean in the School of Government and Public Policy and director of the Center for Complexity Economics, Applied Spirituality, Public Policy at the OP and Jindal Global University in India, among many other positions, because your bio is very extensive. So I do recommend everyone to just read the full bios, all the panelists, and you also serve as a special advisor on sustainability to Toronto Center, among many other things. So very, very warm welcome, our panelists here. And what we're going to be doing together with Alexander is we're going to explore some of those key concepts as a dialogue. So I'm going to ask you, when I'm going to position and share with you the first question, if you can build on the answers of each other, knowing that this is new terrain for all of us. So just like you to really see what comes, what emerges for you as deepening insight or perhaps whole new ideas. And so the first question that I would like to then ask you, and Alexander will be asking the second question, is if we look now at these new paradigm principles of unity and diversity, holarchy instead of hierarchy, and evolutionary coherence, how do those principles feature in your work for the transformation of our societal systems? And I'd like to start with you, Flavia, first, and then Charles, and then Naresh.
Okay, thank you, Anneloes. And thank you for bringing the law in the new paradigm, because it's very hard to do that. You know that. Well, we need to start to see law in another way that we see until now. Law, in a deep sense, are orders that unfold with beauty and complexity to allow the flow of the life. They are teleonomically guided by a deep meaning, this sacredness of all life. So our orders display in different levels, in different subtle levels, with beauty, with harmony, and with also with a process. The more subtle these orders are, the more they are guided by the timeless ethics of the laws of the universe. And the paradox is that they are simple and more essential. There is a beauty in this process to see how the laws display his different ethics levels. From another point of view, law are the energy channels through which the law of life flows in each culture, and each culture is wired in different ways. That is important because sometimes we think a law as a unique things. Not every culture is wired by different channels of energy. In the new paradigm, the principle of unity and diversity is expressed in a process of evolution that is organic. The law also could be organic, honoring the diversity of law of each community. As a fabric, each one contributes its color and texture, and the integration occurs at the level of shared values. One of the problems with the current system is that we want to put international order on top of local laws without listening to and understanding local practices. And people do not feel that these systems are their own because they do not respond to their wiring of life flow. So sometimes we think in a unit system, but not. We need organic system. Each system has its own color, its own emotional flow. So this is the beauty of the system. All of that go together. It is not possible to evolve to a subtle order without first making the heroic journey to the roots of that trauma, and heal it. Also, the law can be in trauma if the law is disconnected to the roots of the culture. For this is connected, in these connections, the law is absencing, it's in the mood absencing, and it is disconnected with the system. So the wire of the system, the wire of the energy is cut. So this is a traumatization in law itself. In this journey to healing the trauma in the law, we need to go deeper in the roots of the law and look there what is broken, because when there is a trauma, it's because in this point the law of the cosmos is broken. So healing the trauma is also go back to this point where the law is broken and put there the right law again. So we do this journey. Until now, we think a trauma as individual, how we can heal our own trauma. But now we face the challenge to heal collective traumas. And the law is a great, formidable tool for that, because have the possibility to make in this point where the law is broken, because the law is outside the cosmic law, the cosmic order, put again this order. We need to reconnect the disconnected part of the system to create a coherence and presence, because coherence is be together and be in contact. With something is cut, we are not more in contact. Coherence is only possible when all parts are connected and unified in purpose. That is why the law is a fundamental part of the transformation. It is one of the tools of the process of change to the new paradigm, provided that we connect with its transcendent essence and immanence to the purpose of life. In my experience as a judge of child and young offender, I realized the importance of embodying the law in connection and presence with the different layers of the field, and use the law not for discipline, but instead to strengthen the inner law and the connection with the meaning of justice. All the people have a strong sense of justice. All the child know what justice is. It's wiring in our brain also. So we need to use the law not as discipline, as a modern times, but instead of that, as a strength, the inner law and the connection, the inner law with the law of the cosmos. It's time to connect with the more essential justice in every action of our life. It's the way to reestablish our responsibility with humanity as individual, but also as collective. It's time to looking forward the essence of the justice and the essence of this law that is the connection with the law of the cosmos. Thank you, Anneloes.
Thank you so much. This is so fundamental what you just shared, because you've given us the key for how law can become regenerative and healing rather than punitive. And that is so important. Earlier in some of the previous sessions, people were speaking about how fear is such a major blockage, but a lot of people fear the law. And law has been used to create a lot of fear. And what you just shared is how love based on the cosmological law can actually give us a guidance in order to make that journey towards these thrivable civilizations. So thank you so much. And Charles, I'd love to hear how you can build with that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So I very much appreciated Flavia's remarks, especially the part about law being a way that life energy is, or life itself is channeled, or maybe the law, this is what law should be, or is ideally channels through a culture. we recognize that there's something sacred about the law. It originated as a sacred function, and some of that perception is still with us today in the regalia of judges and courtrooms and the ritual around it. We recognize this as an embodiment of something sacred, which is the cultural agreement about what is right, what is just, what a good human being does, what is not allowed. It's a way that we collectively guide our behavior. And that makes, to do that effectively, to not get lost, we have to have some collective sense of who we are as a species, where we are going, what a human being is for, what is important in life, how the world works. All of these things are embodied in the set of agreements that we call law. They're also embodied in other systems, in money especially. That's also a system of agreements, economics, and education, science, technology. All of these things in their direction and their methods embody our deeper stories. And I know that in the course of the last couple of days, we've talked about a transition in our stories from a narration of the world that is deterministic and reductionistic and competitive and so forth into one of interbeing. And as I use that word, I want to honor Thich Nhat Hanh, who I don't know if he actually invented the word, but he certainly was one of the people who started using that early on. But it's a very natural term to express what we're talking about here, an understanding of our mysterious, intimate connections with each other that go beyond simply forces operating on masses, but that understand that existence itself is a relationship. Even in quantum mechanics, something cannot be said to exist at a certain point in space-time until a measurement has been taken. In other words, until a relationship has been entered into with the observer. So I'm not going to dwell too long on the metaphysical and physical foundations of this, but just to say that the task before us, as we talk about designing or constitutionalizing new systems, I want to say, like, even before we go there, what does the concept of design as normally understood, what does that smuggle in as far as assumptions go? One thing, so the third principle that you mentioned of, I can't remember how you said it, but some kind of emergence of order, that basically understanding that order, design, intelligence in this world, beauty, meaning, these are not solely human creations that we impose onto a world that has none of these properties. That is a conceit of modernity that puts human beings in the center of the universe as the sole source of intelligence. Replacing, well, we'd like to think that replaced the idea of God as the sole animating power and source of intelligence. But that's actually a fairly degenerate understanding of God that in itself is a feature of the modern mind. Originally, divinity or sacredness was inherent in all matter, in all things. So when we speak of design, I want to just flag this pitfall, that and not to say that we never should try to design anything and never exercise our creativity and never make plans. And no, I'm not saying that. But what we need to understand that complexity, life, organization, that these are inherent properties of the universe, and that we can reconceive what a human being is for in light of that understanding, so that we are no longer the lords and masters imposing design onto a world that has none, but we become servants of that which wants to be born. To even countenance such a thing as that which wants to be born is already a huge departure from science, because it's an anthropomorphic projection. There's no wanting outside of the human being, right? Well, it's time to let go of that, because our attempt to impose, to ascend above nature and to create utopia, to create even a better world by imposing our designs onto it, I think we can agree that it is not working very well. The condition of humanity is not improving, certainly not over the course of my lifetime. And we could argue about whether it's improved since primitive agrarian or hunter-gatherer days. That's a whole other conversation. But just looking at the state of humanity in my country, things are not getting any better. And we're supposed to, my country, we're supposed to be the pinnacle of development. So that's why many people now are looking toward other world stories. For example, indigenous world stories, or the world stories from wisdom traditions within our own cultures, to find another way to understand who we are and what's real and how to live in this world. So these are, so this bears on what we even mean by design. You know, I've done work in various fields. Basically, my work is about, okay, what does the story of interbeing look like as translated into money, into economics, into science, into medicine, into education, and so on, into law a little bit. I haven't actually done that much thinking about that, some. And so I used to have this idea that all I had to do was come up with the design, and then somehow, like, I didn't really think exactly how it was going to work, but somehow it would be so brilliant that everybody would be like, oh yeah, this is what we got to do. It would be like this matter of persuasion, and you know, it doesn't work, because even if in the very rare occasion that I gain the ear of somebody in power, what I've discovered is that they'll be like, yeah, Charles, sounds great, but I can't implement any of that. If I even venture into that territory, you know, what's the opposition party going to say? What are my financial backers going to say? What about the electorate? What about the lobbyists? What about this? What about, it's just impossible. So that really made me reconsider my whole strategy. How do we serve as agents of a change that is beyond our capacity to control, predict, or force into existence? And it becomes a matter of listening, a matter of waiting, and then a matter of acting through a recognition of a call to action that might be unexplainable by the rational mind. And what is the nature of that call? That call is you care about something. The call comes through the heart. And so, okay, I'm not saying that let's abandon this idea of designing systems, writing constitutions, embodying. I mean, this is what a lot of my work has been, translating this into systems and agreements. But it's just something to be aware of. It's a different orientation that can then come in to, say, the design of law. One of the things that Flavia said was that local systems of law are now being subordinated to global imperatives, things like trade treaties or global, maybe medical policies. I'm not sure exactly what she was referring to, that are disconnected to the needs of a local community. And the same thing has happened even on a smaller scale, where law has become disconnected. Are you wanting me to finish soon? I wasn't sure how long I was supposed to speak. Yeah. Anyway, just another half minute then, just to circle back to that. So it becomes a matter of how do you reconnect the system of sacred agreement called law with the actual needs of a place and of the evolving consciousness of humanity. So, because right now, law, actually, it's illegal to do a lot of the things that are most necessary for the planet, and uneconomic to do a lot of the things that are most necessary for the planet. So the big question here in our design efforts is, how do we realign these systems of agreement with the new stories and the new consciousness that are coming to the fore today? So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Charles. That's very powerful, and these are very, very fundamental questions that we need to explore and build on. And a very important point you raised about indeed design as well. Just like we need a different understanding of law, we need a different understanding of design. And kind of the position that we're taking here is that life itself is a constitution. So if you're looking deeper at the information, again, the architecture of the universe itself is a living constitution. It's quite incredible, and we can actually apply that. And when we do by design, we become regenerative and thrivable. And if we don't, then life gives immediate feedback. And we call that a sustainability crisis. So Naresh, I'd love to hear from you and learn further from you.
Indeed, let me let me start by thanking the Laszlo Institute, and in particular Alexander, for having me with you. This has been a wonderful symposium so far. I've really been enjoying this. Building on what Charles was talking about, I think the way I think about the design challenge is by looking at my backyard, and I think about the deck and the garden. So if you want, the design process, I think, is more like cultivating the garden rather than building the deck, which is an engineering project that has a design up front. And that's, for me, is the way one might think about it. It does have a little bit of forethought and planning, but a lot of it is evolutionary in nature. And you can't be sure of what will emerge at the end, although with love and care, you do get something desirable. In terms of the law, I think Flavia was touching on some very important points to do with what the law can and should be. We also need to think of what the law is as it is now. And as it is now, I would argue, to quote Lord Denning from the UK, who once said, justice must be above the law. Somehow the law does not always deliver justice to the world's peoples. I was the director of a commission on legal empowerment of the poor in the UN, and I wrote a book as well in 2014 on legal rights of the poor, and I teach a course on legal empowerment of the poor. What we found was that 4 billion people, now it's about 4.5 billion people on the planet, cannot use the law to improve their lives. They only encounter the law in a punitive way when they are punished for something. So something serious needs to be done about how we make law, how we implement law, and for whom we make law. In fact, who makes the law also needs to be re-examined. So these two are really nice for me to build on, because I've been thinking myself about quite a few of these issues. I work now in academia. I took the bold step recently after spending about 3 decades working in policy making with politicians, prime ministers and presidents and ministers of government. And I have been trying to use the principles of unity, of holarchy, and of evolutionary coherence for the last 25 years. The reason I moved, one might say, is because I sort of gave up on trying to make this work in what I used to call, and people call, the real world. And I figured out maybe I don't understand this thing well enough. I started my work in complex adaptive systems thinking and worked with some of the leaders in the field across the world. So these principles I hold very close to my heart. Panarchy and synarchy and holarchy and holons rather than hierarchies, the Janus two-faced, in every holon, it sees both top and bottom. It's not only from top to bottom. And working with these principles over all these years, in the federal government of Canada and in the United Nations system, it's very difficult. The existing institutional arrangements and the paradigm that we are in, it's a stronghold. And we need to find these ways of how we will get out of it. And as Charles was saying, it'll be sowing seeds. And I thought the best way to understand something is perhaps to teach it. And so now I teach. We have set up a center that has 3 main streams of work. One is, and they're all related to public policy. And as you know, law and politics are at the heart of public policy. So these three streams are complex adaptive systems, or if you like, complexity economics. So how do we remake an economics that does not have to make the simplistic assumptions of mainstream economics, which are about equilibria? And we know that what we are dealing with is non-equilibria, far from equilibrium systems, or at minimum non-equilibrium systems. We are dealing with situations of imperfect information systems. We are dealing with human beings who have bounded rationality, not perfect rationality, and so on. We are not just self-interested robots, in other words. We are something much more than that. And mainstream economics uses all these simplifications. So we are now asking the questions, how do we get out of this and see a real world economics in a very different way, building on the principles we are talking about? The next stream of work is quantum social science. So how do we use the principles of entanglement and superposition and non-locality in the public policy process? What would public policy look like if made in this different way? And the third stream is the stream of applied spirituality. And when we brought this up at the beginning, some colleagues were a bit doubtful. They are all enamored now, because we need to ask ourselves the question, who are we? What am I? You know, so what we have found, and I teach some, give some lectures on this, the mystical core of all the world's major religions is the same, almost the same. They all teach a shared consciousness, a oneness of humanity. And so that blends so neatly with consciousness studies, the new cognitive sciences. They are all reinforcing each other. And so this is the kind of contribution we are hoping to make. And I'm hoping to collaborate with the Laszlo Institute with your work, which I have read up on the SEEDS Constitution and found it really, really fascinating. And bringing it all together. So now we hopefully can bring exactly these principles that we are talking about here into the public process, public policy process, into the way public service is delivered, and hope to join hands with everybody to try to make this a reality.
I love that. That's really groundbreaking work. And yes, completely for the collaboration. This is fascinating. Alexander, I'd like to bring you in so you can share our next question.
Thank you so much. And so now there's going to be a little switch here with Anneloes. I'm going to come in. She's stepping out just for this round. And it's obviously your loss here, Charles and Flavia and Naresh, that now you don't have her with on the screen, but bear with me. Wonderful. Isn't this, I also want to share with everyone who's tuning in and watching and listening and really hopefully engaging in this participatory listening engagement where you are in the dialogue with the speakers as well, listening into what is emerging here. I know that my own level of frustration, because I have so much to share as well. You must too, as you're listening to this. This brings up a lot of questions and a lot of potential for us to understand how we can really be involved in embodying and enacting these new, not necessarily even new, because these are actually age-old ways of communing, common unity, community. But rather than wax forth on this, I'm going to ask another question here of our lovely panel. And maybe we can go in reverse order here. I mix it up a little bit. We'll start with Charles and then move to Naresh and end with Flavia. And the question now is, if we were to think about the aspect in which all these new constitutions are coming online, people are working on these kind of things. We've seen the SEEDS thing that Anneloes has shared. If we go from the principles that we've been discussing just now, Naresh, you were just focusing on as well, and we start to think in terms of the important actions that we need to take, personally, interpersonally, organizationally, what are the important actions that you would call to our attention? You know, because tomorrow again, we're going to be moving into action collectively around this. So just to prepare for that, how would you think about that? Charles?
Yeah, well, So just before I answer that question, I'm going to not answer the question by saying that to make a generic statement about what is important outside of a frame of relationality actually subtly draws on what I call the old story, the story of separation. What is important for whom? For me, something, it might be important for me to write an essay on something. For somebody else, the most important thing to do to contribute to the future that we are all serving could be to learn the guitar and give voice to something that has been seeking expression in them. For somebody else, it might be to work with children in a kindergarten. For somebody, I mean, it doesn't have to. So to say, okay, here is what is important. Is I'm cautious to say that. However, I can say that most generally the question maybe implies important for what, and that goes back to what is a human being for and what is humanity for on Earth. I mean, that's what important comes from. I would then offer a new and ancient truth, which is that the purpose of a human being and humanity generally is to contribute to life and beauty on Earth, to serve life and beauty on Earth. So, okay, then we can translate that into policies, into designs of constitutions by holding that in mind. And often this isn't just like some arid philosophy, because it often animates our policies with new imperatives. Like, when it comes to environmental policy, one thing that gets ignored, even under the guise of sustainability, which then becomes about carbon credits and measuring greenhouse gases and reduces environmentalism, reduces sustainability to one thing, which is totally inconsistent with a systems view that understands that the health and the homeostasis and the coherence and the evolution of Earth depends on all of its cells, organs, and tissues, because it is a living being. That's what happens when we formalize and reduce a complex thing to a simple thing. And then when we say, okay, but what does environmentalism become, or environmental policy become, when we understand ourselves as in service to life? It expands. It includes, like, yeah, we're not going to sacrifice this coastal wetlands for, to build a new port. Even if when we calculate the carbon math, we could offset it with a field of solar panels or something like that. No, this is life, this is sacred, and we are here to protect and regenerate the biosphere as part of what a human being is for. So that would be, to answer your question, what's important, what that actually means for each person is unique, but that it would be an animating principle that I would offer. Important for what? What do we agree is important?
Charles, thank you so much. The way I'm capturing that in a very concise form is contextual action in service of life. Contextualized action, better says contextualized. So it depends. The answer is it depends, as you're saying. And that is the question of really thinking, not one size fits all, but thinking, how is this serving? How does this action fit in with this dynamic in this context? And this is the kind of thing, Naresh, that you are looking at with regard to complex adaptive systems. And what's your take on this in terms of important action?
Let me start with what I have found important for me at the personal level, and then I will share at the institutional level. I have found in my own understanding of the world and how I make meaning, I first had to go through my own contemplative practice, and to understand my own true nature, I had to go through the process of what am I, who am I, to learn and to go beyond what I now see as the layers of my own egoistic structures and conditionalities. So I had to live what I wanted to teach. I had to learn to become that. That helps me, I believe, to be more natural. And then I have less worry about the philosophical, metaphysical challenges of what is important or what is right. It tends to flow more naturally, so to speak. Not to say that you become infallible. We are human and will always be fallible. But then I start to understand my own sharing of the same consciousness like all other humans. That begins to give you the kind of natural connection to all of us. So when I say oneness, I don't have to anymore like preach a desired attribute in human beings. I begin to recognize it everywhere I look. And I think so that at the personal level, I think there is some work to be done. I have more work to do. And I encourage all of us to look at that so that we internalize that which we are philosophizing about a lot and really get to know it deeply as a human being. Then at the institutional level, in terms of action points for tomorrow, listening very carefully to the symposium so far, and recalling some of the ideas from yesterday, I think we have to be careful to distinguish between ameliorating the negative consequences of the existing paradigm and not confuse it with the new shoots of the emerging paradigm. So there is a lot of work ongoing, in which we are ameliorating the negative impacts of the existing paradigm in which we all operate. But it's going way beyond that and nurturing shoots of this new paradigm that we need to be talking about. If we take climate change to build a little bit on what Charles was mentioning, when I deal with climate change and we teach it as a public policy challenge, one might say that climate change, the cause of climate change is greenhouse gases emission, and that greenhouse gas emission is the result of fossil fuel driven capitalism, which is the way our civilization is currently organized. But when we examine the fossil fuel based capitalism we have, we find driving that is this desire for endless economic growth, and the kind of growth that is based on consumption, a growth which means that we must consume more and more. We are failing to decouple quality of life from consumption. So we find way underneath something else, and that is this lack of security, fear, this inadequacy that we feel as individuals, that we are always seeking something more, something material more to make ourselves complete. So now we are getting to root causes, and it's there that one's own spiritual nature becomes clear. And if you don't have that understanding and our new paradigm is not able to integrate that, I fear that all we will be doing is ameliorating the negative impacts. We will be acting at a superficial cause level. You see what I mean? Because we need to go from the symptoms of global warming and sea level rise to the greenhouse gases, yes, and reduce that, and go below that to fossil fuel-based capitalism. We need to go even below that to understanding the nature of humans as we are and what is driving this whole thing. And if we don't get there, then we are not going to make progress. And I think that kind of action we need to understand clearly as we go forward. And finally, let me make the point about the trajectory of change. When paradigms are emerging, it looks like they have a long tail, an incubation period, where you don't see much. It is where the new ideas are starting to bubble up, networks are being formed, and gradually we begin to get bigger and bigger networks until hopefully we meet the tipping point. While we are struggling to move up the hill, we have the keepers of the old system, those who benefit from the old system. And we have to take action as bridge builders to move these keepers of the old system onto this new trajectory of change. Otherwise, we will delay reaching that tipping point for dramatic shift. It doesn't mean that we are not making progress all along the way, but that tipping point, arriving there, can be quite elusive unless we take a multidimensional approach. So in terms of actions, those are some of the ideas that I will put on the table. And I will finally just want to say on education, because I'm now active in the field. I wondered, with my students at the master's level, I sometimes worried that we have already lost it. They have already been educated up to a bachelor's level and are already within, their minds are so set in the existing paradigm. It's as though we have lost them already. It's so difficult for them to begin to change. So then I wonder, is it secondary school, or is it primary school, or is it kindergarten? Where do we begin to sow the seeds of change? I conclude that we can start at any point within this system and begin to make this change. The point at which I am making the contribution, which is mainly in graduate school, is that these people will then come out, they will become policymakers, they will become teachers, and they will begin to sow seeds within their own spheres of influence and hopefully help to support the paradigm of change. Over back to you, Alexander.
Naresh, thank you so much. I think what we're all talking about here in terms of actions is really about how to human well, something that I got from Alan Watts, exploring what does it mean to human well as an expression of the universe. How Alan Watts will talk about how in the springtime the trees don't put out leaves, they don't produce that doesn't make, that is not what they do in the spring, or the flowers putting out their buds and their flowers. The flowers bloom and the trees leaf, and doing that is spring. That is spring. How do we human on this planet? And what does that mean to bring about that aspect of our interconnected, interdependent co-arising in the context of thrivability with all things? I think what I'm hearing from you as well is really this kind of embodied and enacted systemic consciousness, or a way of developing a relational frames of being that is something, as you say, we can learn and bring into different levels of engagement at any point in our life. So thank you so much. Flavia, how do you hold this question of action, and what are the important steps we may take in thinking about drafting constitutions and so on?
Yes, I think, as Naresh said, we are in a point with the transition of paradigm. So the old paradigm is the modern paradigm, is the discipline, the punishment, the law is something outsider. And now we are going through a new paradigm that we are the law. The law is an internal law, in an inner connection. That is what we look forward. Knowing myself is knowing my law, is staying my law. But not also on a personal level, also in institution. How can institution drive in with inner law, with knowing the purpose, with knowing what is the vision we're going to? I think we need to embody this new vision. The person we are in the field of law. In this sense, we need, for me, the action are strengthen improve the intercultural and interreligious dialogue. That is important. The dialogue, the circle of dialogue, because the building of the new system is on the basis, from the basis. It's not on the top of the system. We need to make the architecture by dialogues in the basis. The dialogue between cultures, between interreligious dialogue. Build a global legal community engagement with a new paradigm. We need more people who work for the new paradigm in the legal system. Appeal to the sacred text. They are the voices of divine law in all the cultures. Also, the religions have this notion of divine law. The divine law speak through this text, and all the religions have this text. Include restorative practice of ancient traditions. Now we know in restorative justice that ancient practice are the more relevant way to put together in the same field all the community for resolve their problems. Trauma-informed law approach. We need to know about nature of trauma in the individual and collective level. If we don't approach the level of trauma in our roots, in our culture, in our body, in our society, we can't have a new system. We need first to heal this level of trauma. And widening human rights, including neuro rights, focusing on consciousness. Now in Constitution, we talk about neuro rights because we need to maintain, to keep safe our intimacy, our mental intimacy. And that include our consciousness. So also this is a new step in the constitutional. Well, this is my point, Alexander.
Thank you so much. And, you know, and maybe Anneloes, you can come back and join us now. What I am going to do, if it's all right with you, is I've been having a little chat here on the side also with Anneloes, and we know that Hazel Henderson is also here with Hazel is in the audience. And we're thinking that maybe it might be nice to have her share some of her perspectives or comments about what we are talking about here. This has to do very much with this, what I think all of us has touched on, also the sacred aspect of being and becoming together. And how do we bring that into maybe what we're working forward to tomorrow is this sort of a constitutionalized frame. How do we bring that into our collective action and interaction? Hazel.
Well, I'm taking this in at a very deep level. And I think that I'm not really ready to jump in on all of this. I mean, you know, I operate on the action principle, and I've been an activist really all my life, starting off with starting an organization in New York City called Citizens for Clean Air in the 1960s. You know? And it has been about do no evil, don't do no harm, because I see how so much well-meaning activism has not been deeply enough researched. And I love this whole idea that what we're talking about here is contextualizing on a much broader level everything that we do. And for me, my consciousness ever since I was a child really has been that I am a small part of a species in relationship to all other species living on this planet, totally dependent on the free photons that come from our mother star, the sun. And that's my kind of conceptual pegboard. And that allows me to stay away from a lot of half-baked activities and try to focus on the ones that I feel sure will do no harm.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Ahimsa, do no harm. Anneloes, would you like to share any view? And then we're going to also move to sharing some of the questions with the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, I really profoundly appreciate all that's been shared here by all of you. And also what I can see at the foundation of all of that is this very, very deep fundamental understanding of the nature of reality and life itself. And when you really put that in the center, it's going to inform everything else. They have a tendency to make things very complex. But if you really ask the question, as life as life, what would life have me do? Then you're automatically in the pattern that connects. It is really also that simple. The action begins really there. Not only does it begin within, but it begins also from that fundamental understanding. I am life, you are life, we are life, we are life together. And how do we now apply this to create a really beautiful world? And bringing it back to beauty, Charles, what you were speaking with. What I found fascinating in the study of both cosmological law, sacred indigenous law, as well as constitutional law, which is my background, those three, is that, and I started as a pianist, is actually that it's deeply harmonic. I learned more from Bach about law than probably in all those years in law school. Because when law is really aligned, when outer law and inner law aligned, there's beauty, there's harmony, it's timeless. Even all of those centuries later, we can still appreciate Bach or the great artists or the poets. So life is very, very deeply harmonic, and that's that evolutionary coherence principle that we spoke of earlier. And it means that our bodies have an inner sense of knowing the right direction. And that's something we can bring back to our children. We can start with that when they were very, very little, because they are born with that innate sense. Thank you so much. And Alexander, look forward to hearing some of those questions.
Yeah, just also to share here what I'm hearing, what you're mentioning, and what's coming out for me from the panel also is this relationship between evolutionary ethics and evolutionary aesthetics. And in a way, we are the instrument, self as instrument, being able to sense into what is emerging. Charles, as you were talking about listening into, this is really cultivating this empathetic capacity that we have, the empathetic intelligence. And Naresh, you were talking about in education, how do we bring this in? But empathy-based education, empathy-oriented education, so we can indeed even listen into that which is seeking to emerge, as Charles, you were talking about. And that sense of harmony, almost thinking of ourselves as human tuning forks, with what are we resonating? How do we create those, not just resonance, but the consonance that is part of the patterning of coherence, holotropism, and these dynamics of curating emergence for thrivability, as I like to think of it. I'm going to share one last thing here, and then we're going to share some of the questions and see what we can talk about together. This is, and Anneloes has seen this way too many times, but it's on my chair, and I'm wondering if you can all read this, because it's kind of small, but it says here, be the systems you want to see in the world, right? This is taking off on something that Mahatma Gandhi said, right? Be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the systems you want to see in the world. But you notice it says a couple of other things as well. It says, be you in the world. So this is truly fundamentally about your authenticity and your voice. And it also says, the systems want to see. The systems want to see. There is something emerging that we can listen into. And we can seek to be curators of emergence, not just planning with change, which is very projective and impositional, and not even only designing idealized systems design and other approaches that design potential futures, pretty still homocentric. How do we listen into that which is speaking to us about thrivability, about future creating, life affirming, and opportunity increasing dynamics? This, I think, is exactly what we're exploring, and how we can create the kind of constitution even that addresses this. Let me share with you some of the questions that have come up, and I'm going to, Hazel, if you're comfortable staying with us here up on the group here, then maybe some of the questions come up. It would be great if you have any responses to them as well. I hope that's all right with you. So, for example, we have a question here. Can the management of our worldwide technosphere be a unifying objective in the new paradigm? Tom Christoffel has asked that. Please, anyone who would like to address that.
No, I was just going to say, to kick off, maybe Alexander, if I might address that very quickly. one of the issues we find is in our attempts to teach like technology policy, let's say, in the social sciences where policy is largely designed, what constitutes valid knowledge is even tested. Now, we are talking a lot about, the spiritual dimension and how to bring this into this paradigm of politics. And the first question I really had to search deep for was, is internal knowing even valid knowledge in the sense of publishable in an economic or a social science journal, for example? I mean, in my little world of academia, it becomes a really hard question. Fortunately, we have enough evidence now to be able to show that internal knowledge is valid social science knowledge, which is publishable. And that begins to allow us to make the link between, for example, spirituality and policy, and including technology policy. And that is, I think, which can guide, or hopefully can guide us in the way we deal with the technosphere. I just wanted to make that quick little link, but leave it to other colleagues to add to that.
Could I just follow up on that? From the 6 years of experience I had in Washington, D.C. as a cabinet level science advisor to the Office of Technology Assessment, the National Science Foundation, and the National Academy of Engineering on public engineering policy. And it so horrified me that 6 years to see the politicization of technology and science, and all driven by ego and money and what I would call, the value system of the lower chakras, you might say. And I walked away from that and wrote a book called The Politics of the Solar Age. And I knew that the future had to be to get off fossil fuels and nuclear power and allow the system to evolve as human knowledge was evolving toward using the free photons and learning how to harvest them as efficiently as plants do. And so we had to approach technology, I thought, with incredible humility, learning from the phytoplankton and learning from the plants. And so I spent a lot of my effort in that book deconstructing all of the false assumptions of economics. I wanted to completely expose economics as a fraud, but it's still governing deep in the algorithms of financial players and asset managers. It's still driving us all over the cliff.
Can I add on a little bit? Continuing from Hazel's invocation of unwarranted assumptions of economics, and we could also say energy policy, like one of those assumptions is that you see it everywhere. Our need for energy is projected to rise to whatever by whatever year. Like, do we actually need more and more energy? Well, that is an economic question. It's also a spiritual question that Naresh brought up when he talked about the insatiable need of a separate self to have more and more and more. Fundamentally, when we are cut off through our systems, through our trauma, through our ideology, from our connectedness and belonging and community, I mean, this isn't just a bad idea that we're a separate self. It manifests as systems. It manifests as the breakdown of community. It manifests as most children have, in my society, couldn't name 5 plants or 10. And even if they could name them, they wouldn't be multidimensionally connected to them using them as food and medicine, knowing what animals eat those plants, knowing their role in the ecosystem, being part of that ecosystem, not just knowing it as an object of study, but as a participation. You take all that away. Yeah, I mean, you can meditate to fulfill your spiritual needs or something like that, or to be connected to source, but okay, but what about the community? What about building a world around our nature, which is that we are interbeings? So this plays into economics, like the idea that human betterment is a matter of GDP growth. I'm sure I don't need to shoot that down here. I'm sure we all understand the shortcomings of that paradigm, but it also comes out in energy growth. Are we actually happier when we consume more BTUs per capita, drive more miles per capita, have more stuff, have bigger houses per capita? No, empirically, we are not happier. So what if we oriented toward meeting the needs that we recognize when we understand who we actually are as interconnected beings who have been cut off from that? That opens up, all kinds of possibilities. That and because I'm not saying let's do with less. It's actually let's do with much more of what we really need and less of what we don't actually need, that's been substituting futilely for what we do need. Like what we need, well, I mentioned some of them. I just add one more, is aesthetic nourishment, beauty, to be surrounded by things that are made with care and made in a relationship to myself. I mean, how satisfying would that be if every article of clothing that you owned was something that was really crafted, not only for beauty, but also for you? Like, would you need closets and closets full of shoes? This is the kind of thing that it's like paradise is so close to us, just a shift of perception away. And instead we're like, well, how do we produce more to meet? And yeah, there are people in serious deprivation all over this earth, starving to death, stunted children, people in dire poverty. But that isn't because we don't have enough. It's because of maldistribution. And to sweep that aside and think that it is a problem of production and say, well, or the problem of overpopulation or any of these other reductionistic metrics that substitute for complex systems understanding is contributing to the problem. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Flavia, do you have anything you'd like to share on that?
I am agree with Charles and Naresh, and the point is the equity in our society. It's a point equity. The justice is very nearly what is fair for all of us. This is our point, and this is we need to be human beings in context. Our mind will need to be in context. The knowledge we have is not enough now for understand what happened in the world, what happened with human beings, what happened in social emotional behavior of our society. We need more, and this more is not in the past. We need more to go inside us to search for that. So we are in a dark period, but also it's a light period, because we have we can understand better how we can understand better, and it's we only with immerse in our context. It's the only way is immerse ourselves in our context. There is another way.
Wonderful. This is really some things that we're exploring also at the Institute here, is these questions of supercoherence. What is supercoherence and how does it express in the universe? And we're looking at it from a systems framework, like Naresh has been talking about. Talked about this a little bit yesterday, and the way in which when there is this levels of integral, thrivable, flourishing coherence within the system, that all of its subsystems are well attuned, well aligned. There's a healthy and authentic system, whether it's an ecosystem or whether it's you as a biological being, as a socio-psychological biological being. If you are running well, and thriving, that's a level of coherence. The other levels is how you're connected to your environment. Are you in non-dysfunctional relationships? Are you engaged without sabotage and intrigue in your personal and interpersonal relationships? And so that's another level of coherence. When you have that relationship between your embedding systems, context, and between the systems that you embed, then you have super coherence, when a system is coherent in both directions. So how do we create those conditions? How do we create the systemic nurturance spaces that evoke and that hold and that nourish, really like greenhouses, these kind of dynamics? I'm going to ask to see if it's possible to bring up Jean Houston as well to there she is. Wonderful, thank you so much. Jean, thank you also for joining us here. And why don't I just open it directly to see if you have anything you want to share before we go on to other questions. Some comments or reflections from you?
Well, I do have some thoughts, rather naughty ones, quite frankly. And that is, having studied so many social narratives, so many, if you will, the myths of culture and civilization, there is one thing that almost everyone has in common, and it's in their creation myths, or the early beginnings. And so you have this wonderful creation of these beautiful people and this wonderful environment. And then the same thing happens in all the myths. A monkey wrench is tossed in. Would you say this is true of every indigenous culture? And not just a monkey wrench, but something that really gums up the entire work. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, you have the snake who has all the lines and does just the right thing to turn this beautiful plan on its head. It isn't Eve, it's really the snake. It's something that comes up from the Ouroboros, the deep ancestral organic stuff of existence. It's a snake. And there's repetitions of this everywhere. So it makes me ask the terrible question, are we a blighted race to begin with? I remember talking to Hazel many years ago also about her difficult visits in DC. One of the things that we are doing, I think, ultimately, looking for a new order of coherence or super coherence, if you will, is looking for some kind of transition paradigm, not just for culture, for consciousness, but for our very, very being. Now we could say, oh, there's psychotherapy and all the other varieties of therapies, and of course the religious traditions of entering into other realms of consciousness where we do exist in a state of super coherence. I mean, nowadays, economics, as Hazel has said, economics is our monkey wrench that seems to throw everything off, and we could name many, many other things. But I think there is this prior question, why are we so naughty? Why is all great drama, all great music, Bach too, always has in it this strange variation that is somewhat off? Why? Is it because we are placed on this planet by something or other to give us enough drama, creative cactuses, if you will, something that is in our very system to give us the energy, the impetus to explore our darkness for what is beneath that darkness, which may be not only a deeper life, a deeper light, but also a way of entering into co-creation, coexistence with the very nature of the universe herself. I mean, there's so many stories around this. And when I study also the indigenous traditions, there's also very interesting solutions that come about. So that's my question. I mean, what I've heard here is so potent, so beautiful, and so right in so many ways. And we can blame one thing or the other. But I wonder if we are not just given this very curious, mixed up body-mind system so as to re-educate it, to re-pattern it into a system that can work co-creatively in super coherence with the whole.
Rose, I mean, Anneloes.
That's so funny. Yeah, Rose is the character of the book that Jean and I just published. So I love that. And Jean, I love your question. I think it's so spot on. Yes. Well, maybe the purpose of the dissonance is that we become aware of the consonants. So that, and where would we be without that? As you always say, Jean, you know, that's the essence of comedy, right? So the tragedy and the comedy meet right there. So
my father was a comedy writer. He wrote the Bob Hope Show, among many other things. And everything in life was funny to him. So I'm asking, naturally, my father's question.
Naresh, yes.
I want to give a shout out to Hazel, whose work I have read for the last 2 decades, including her book on the solar age. So Hazel, you've been a great mentor to me, and we are still struggling with the economy, and we want to drop the economics as such. These guys are not fixable, but maybe the economy is. So we are looking at complexity and the economy. But in any event, thanks for all you have done. Jean, the answer, my partial answer to the question of why there is always a monkey wrench, I think in all complex adaptive systems, we sometimes arrive at an attractor state which we might not see as desirable, which we might consider as a monkey wrench. But within that attractor state will be seeds that will grow into something desirable over time. So I would take a positive look at this, even the snake in the Garden of Eden. But I just wanted quickly to add, Alexander, on the technosphere question that was posed to us earlier. You know, we have AI all over us now, artificial intelligence. And we recently did a conference with the United Nations in New Delhi on pluriperspectives on the ethics of artificial intelligence. We looked at 84 of the AI ethical statements in the world. About 80 of them are based upon a Western value system. And so we asked, what about if you looked at Advaita Vedanta? What would ethics of AI look like? What about if you look at Confucianism or Buddhism or Taoism? Would we get a different ethical frame for artificial intelligence? And I was amazed, blown away with the kind of insights we got from that conference. We hope to publish that at some point. But I think this pluriperspective and taking alternative philosophical perspectives in which the Western left brain dominance is removed might be helpful to us all in the technosphere.
Could I just follow up a little bit on that? Because we just published a paper by an AI expert called Algorithms Can Never Be Ethical. And it's a beautiful paper. And, you know, these are the deep questions that we have to ask now. See, I think that the term artificial intelligence is an advertising slogan. What they really, because it takes us humans out of agency, and we have to be responsible for the agency in AI and for how the algorithms are biased in terms of the people who train the machines. And so I wrote, one of my editorials recently was, let's train humans before we train machines, because we've got the whole thing ass backwards.
Indeed, indeed. Indeed. Alexander, Jeff Bezos, coming back from space, just said we must now take all our polluting industries from Earth into space.
Yeah.
I was never so shocked in my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
It was unbelievable.
These are precisely the challenges of awareness, of interconnectedness that we're exploring in this symposium. And my friends, we are basically at time. So I'm just going to ask for Charles and Flavia, if you have any final words for this session, and then Anneloes and I will bridge to tomorrow's session, and then we'll call it a wrap for today. Charles, first with you.
I mean, there's so much I could say. This conversation's been getting more and more interesting as it goes along. I mean, just the part about algorithms cannot be ethical, like this idea that we can export our morality onto a formula and somehow escape like the messy human realm of relationship, and make it all clean and precise, and someday administer the whole world according to the numbers. That is like the ultimate expression of a several hundred-year-old ideology that the world is number. Going back to Galileo, only the measurable is real. And I guess that just speaks to the depth of the revolution that we are seeking here, to expand the realm of the real beyond what our dominant religion, science, has told us for a long time. And I could go on, but I know we're out of time. Thank you.
We need to protect our mental intimacy, and also where is the conscious there? It's a lot of things to think about it. But AI, it's transformed our life also, and we need to protect from the some points. And another thing I want to say, that's more and more we need a ethical restoration. That's the way now. Not to speak about moral, because moral is in time and in space, but we need to speak more than about ethical restoration. That's all, Alexander. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Fantastic. And this idea that none of us is as smart as all of us, and of course it depends on how we are connected. There's the connective intelligence that leads to the collective intelligence, that hopefully leads to the collective wisdom and the collective creativity. But this, as Irvin was saying earlier, is the information structure of the universe through which we swim, and that informs us, puts forms into us. So we are truly interbeing all the time. The question is how to live into that, right? And this is really about turning to each other. And this is what we are doing here. So it's fantastic that we are being the systems we wish to see in the world. And this is what we'll explore tomorrow. So let me just thank everyone for participating today and give a brief connection to tomorrow. Anneloes and I are going to share with you a little bit about that. But before we do, I would like to take a moment for everyone to take a moment of pause and to thank our amazing panel who's been with us today, and send energy, because we're not going to hear all the clapping and all the cheering, but the idea is that we can at least be present with you. So thank you so much, Flavia Valgiusti, for being with us today. Thank you, Charles Eisenstein, for sharing with us and for sharing your views and perspectives. Thank you, Naresh Singh, for joining us in this conversation. And thank you for the spontaneity that Hazel and Jean had for joining us here as well. They were unscripted and brought on, and thank you again for joining the dance. This is it, learning to be danced, and not just to dance with, but to be danced by each other and by source. So tomorrow we're going to be exploring, in an interactive full-day participatory session, we're going to have a word of maybe an inspirational stage setting from Tom Attlee from the Co-Intelligence Institute. And then we're going to see how we can craft together the basis for a new planetary constitution, a world constitution, humaning constitution. But truly, we're going to come up only with the essential, actionable, perhaps principles. And Anneloes, maybe you want to say a little more about how we're going to be doing that.
Well, first we'll go through an envisioning session. So we're actually going to go on a little journey into the future, to these more optimal future possibilities, and to explore that together, to really see what are the founding principles and practices of these regenerative and thrivable civilizations. So we'll be doing that. And then we start to know from that future experience, not just thinking about the future, really going to go into those future possibilities, experience it deeply. Full sensory experience will be guiding you through a journey that you then get to share in small working groups. We'll have a lot of small breakout groups on Zoom tomorrow. So you really get an opportunity also to talk with each other, share with each other. And then after that, we're going to also see what's the synergy between us all. So to learn more about each other, you get several opportunities to go through that. And then we'll be starting to see if we can all now distill this into perhaps 10 key principles for that can guide our actions to start to constitutionalize these new paradigm principles, practices, this new way of being, the systems that we wish to become in our world. And we'll also have a wonderful contribution from Tom, right? Maybe you can share a little bit more about that as well, and some practical tools.
Exactly. Well, tomorrow, again, it's going to be a few things of stage setting, but a lot of the time is going to be interacting with each other. You're going to be in breakout rooms, as Anneloes was mentioning. It's going to be a time where we're also going to be encouraging and co-creating the networking frames around this. And I know that we have with us also here the director of Symposia, Bill Stranger, who would like to share with us a little message about one special guest who will be joining us tomorrow as well. Bill?
Yes, in line with our habit of having special surprise guests and even surprising ourselves, David Orr, who has led one of America's leading environmental writers, also has just led a several-year project called the Democracy Project that has brought together many of the leaders throughout the United States to talk about the state of democracy. Is going to be appearing tomorrow morning before Tom Atlee to talk to us about some of the basic principles that we will be embodying in this constitutional document. And I just want to point out here before everybody leaves that there's a very deep self-emerging thread of continuity through this whole process. And that really is it's a term that's been lost, but it really, we should remember it, natural law, that there's a dharma or law that it comes out of reality itself. It's not created by a consensus of people merely. It's something that exists, we exist within, and it imposes itself because it's of the nature of reality. And this is the thread that is now moving forward, whereby the participants in this conference have been prepared by it to be natural law legislators, you could say, to divine these principles, bring them together. And I would just suggest that for all of us looking at the situation in the world today, it's if you don't have moments of despair, you're not paying attention. But if you also don't feel a lit optimism in your heart, you haven't been in this conference or paying attention either. And I would just say that there's something about this event, and I know they always seem modest, but there's something about this event that has something of the quality of what Buckminster Fuller called the trim tab factor. And that's what it describes on great rudders of great ocean liners. They're just huge, and it takes forever to turn a great ship around. To turn the rudder itself is itself difficult. So they have a rudder on the rudder, a little rudder, and that rudder turns the big rudder, which turns the ship. And so this little group is not the only little rudder, but it is a little rudder. And we are preparing ourselves with this work, it's serious work, through a transition that's been described to us of breakdown and renewal. It's not going to be easy, but the contributions we make now, the more preparation, the more we invest, the more we give to it now, the more we'll have available to us in that time of renewal. So I hope to see you all tomorrow. Everybody's going to be welcome, and this is our day together, all together.
Thank you, Bill. And I always consider you a brother from another rudder. Thank you. And we are going to continue this exploration tomorrow. Anneloes, is there any final word?
No, just want to thank everyone who's been here. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I think that itself is that, I know that, Jean calls it the new religion is Zoomism. I think so, you can agree with that. So the fact that we've been so committed to make time and space available to be here with each other through this technology facilitated connection is pretty incredible. So I just want to thank all of you who've been here, because I know that many of you are also really eager to express yourself and to speak and to get into action. So we're going to answer to that tomorrow. So with that, just wish you a wonderful evening or day wherever you are. Here it's after midnight. It's now almost 20 to 1 at night. So I'm looking forward to a good rest, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Alexander, it's always a pleasure to facilitate with you. Bill, thank you so much. All the whole team from behind, everyone was doing an incredible job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hasta mañana, mis amigos. See you tomorrow, same time, same place.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.